There's a huge difference between getting a tick in the "I've done a jibe" column and performing them with any verve, panache and regularity. The fact that the world's best sailors will spend seasons perfecting this one manoeuvre reveals there's an awful lot to it. So much of the skill relies on knowing your equipment, knowing how far you can push it, and then jibing to its strengths. So in this section, we'll be looking at turns on the slalom board with its incredible board speed and long, hard edges. We'll be climbing onto wave boards, which just love to be driven hard through the turns, and even on speed boards, which if you stamp on too heavily, will throw you off like a frisky stallion. Now, all these boards can be jibed if your basic technique is sound. So let's start by recapping on the essential points of the basic shortboard jibe. The shortboard jibe is won and lost in the preparation phase. So unhook in plenty of time and with the back foot on the leeward rail, let the rig pull you up over the centre line. Then body and rig drive towards the centre of the turning circle so that when you release the rig downwind, everything is hanging to the inside. The feet then maintain the trim by staying in the same position until you've sheeted in again on the new tack. It all looks so delightfully simple, so how do we find so many ways to mess it up? Well, hanging back, playing safe and generally being a bit of a wimp is perhaps the most common malaise. In this dire demo, the first error is to sheet out. He then kills the power and momentum completely by bending the arms, straightening the legs, sinking the tail and pulling the rig over his head. The result is not so much a screeching carve as a very tentative, slow wobble. By contrast, the next approach reveals too much flamboyance, but the results are just as damp. The board is never allowed to settle, and rather than maintain even pressure on the back foot, he just keeps stamping on the tail, which bounces up and down like a cork, and finally chucks him off. A destructive hangover from longboard days is the overwhelming desire to scoop the rig to windward as a way to help the board turn. Don't. It pulls your upper body out of position and forces you to stand upright, and when the time comes to flip the rig, you'll find it behind you, and to leeward, where it sends you spinning into wind, knocking you off on the way. Now let's sort these problems out. Firstly, stay sheeted in to maintain mast foot pressure and stop the board bouncing. Always hold the rig forward and at arm's length. Stay one step ahead of the board and bend knees and ankles to absorb the chop. Release the rig when the board is going at its fastest and sheet in before it has a chance to slow down. And only hook in again when you're comfortable and planing. Commitment starts with the hips, which lead the body forward at the entry to the turn. Try to touch the water with your back knee and resist the temptation to stand up as you flip the rig. But it's this blunt refusal to lean the rig into the turn which is so many people's stumbling block. So as you enter the jibe, imagine you have no UJ, so that the board and rig bank over at the same angle. If you can see the front of the board past the mast, you're doing it right. If the sailor's in the way, you're guilty of scooping. A slick boom-to-boom rig change is only possible if you enter with speed and give yourself room. The backhand throws the boom away and crosses over the front hand to grab the new side. With confidence and timing, the maneuver becomes a release and catch with both hands landing on the boom simultaneously. On all shortboards, but especially wave boards, the turning circle can be tightened by increasing back foot pressure. But because everything is speeded up, the timing of the rig release and the foot change are even more critical. Keep the weight pressing forward and move the feet in front of the straps to avoid luffing into wind. In slalom, the jibe marks are where the lead most commonly changes hands, so he or she who cuts the fastest, tightest jibe, hugging the inside slot, often reaps the reward. On or off the slalom course, many speedsters choose a sail which places them on the upper limits of control. The slalom jibe aims to harness and exploit that power and is hence a dynamic exaggeration of the basic technique. The most noticeable differences are the extreme oversheeting, the radical rig lean and the hard, flat carve. You use the power of the rig to drive the board all the way through the turn, along its inside edge. You therefore exit clew first and change the feet before flipping the rig. And with the feet well forward of the straps, you are perfectly set up to pump the sail and show the fleet the backside of your harness. But attempting a tight carve with a big rig can result in you getting overpowered and the foot of the sail hitting the water. See how Bjorn Dunkerbeck reaches right down the boom with his backhand and then cranks the sail in over the centre line. He's killed some of the power and can now carve the board as hard as he likes. As he turns through the wind, he changes his feet and flattens the board off. He then throws the rig upright to gain an extra surge before flipping the rig and deciding which side he will overtake his oppressor. But there are occasions, usually when you're in the lead, that a wide slalom jibe is preferable. With a comfortable cushion, Bjorn Dunkerbeck now bears away gradually and then stretches the arms and upper body forwards. The rig, sheeted in but not over-sheeted, pulls the board through the turn. In that instance, he didn't dump power but used every drop available. Now, who are we to start offering advice to the world champion? But in this case, had his feet been further forward, the board may have stayed on the water. In chop or breaking surf, there's a danger of losing control of the board as you flip the sail and release the mass of pressure. He was obviously just showing off. In marginal winds, it's easy to let unsubtle foot and rig pressure sink the back of the board. Your fastest course in such conditions is tight to the wind, so jibe tight, oversheet as before, and most importantly lean forward onto the boom to increase mast foot pressure and keep the nose down. Then, with the front foot right up by the mast, you can trim the board flat and work it back onto the plane. Don't they make it look easy? The thing about speedboards is there's nothing of them. They're so sensitive to weight transfer that you only have to flex a buttock and they start to turn. The trick is to control your speed, jibe in a very long arc and maintain an even carving angle. To get the board back onto the plane, you must slip back into the straps as soon as possible and pump against the fin. On choppy water, the aim in the jibe is not to be dynamic so much as to survive. Thanks to the narrow tail, you are liable to pivot into wind the moment you jibe the sail. So release the rig early, hold it forwards, and if you feel yourself dropping off the